Hi, I'm Dr. Jason Wagner, Sarasota Vascular Specialist, and thanks for joining us for Whiteboard Wednesdays. Today's goal is to kind of compare or contrast the differences between an arteriovenous fistula and an arteriovenous graft. Both are used for hemodialysis. That's where you're actually washing the blood, usually in center at a hemodialysis center, or at home using home hemodialysis. The big thing is we're going to be creating a connection between an artery and a vein. And we want to have enough flow going through whatever that conduit or tube is. When they have two needles that poke into the arm to use it for dialysis, one can send blood to the machine and the other can bring it back. With either a fistula or a graft, our goal is to have enough flow to have at least 600 cc's of flow per minute or 600 milliliters of flow per minute, have the vein or graft be at least 6 millimeters in diameter, so it's a good, easy target for them to stick with the needles, to be no deeper than 6 millimeters below the skin, and to have that same kind of criteria met at two different areas or a series of two areas at least 6 centimeters apart. That's called the rule of sixes. So the nice thing about a graft is it automatically comes out of the box at least 6 millimeters in size, but fistulas and grafts are a little bit different. So connecting the artery to the vein, a fistula is just simply a vein that has been sewn to an artery. That by definition is the connection, that's the flow, the vein is the conduit. That's the thing that they're using to access with the two needles. A graft is used when someone doesn't have a good enough vein or a big enough vein or a vein that's maybe straight enough to be used for their dialysis access conduit. What we'll usually do if someone's going to be transitioning to hemodialysis, ideally as early as possible in their dialysis pathway, we want to map their arms, usually both arms, to see what their veins options are for a fistula or a graft. Ideally, we'll stay in their non-dominant extremity. So if you're right-handed, we look to use your left arm. The reason for that is if you're on dialysis and you're trying to, you sit there on the machine for 3 to 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, you want to be able to text, email, write, talk, eat during that time, and you ideally want to have your dominant hand protected or preserved for that. If someone does not have a good vein in their non-dominant arm for a fistula, sometimes we'll place a graft in that arm, which is an alternative to using a fistula. For example, if this is the artery here, and we've got our vein kind of running alongside of it, coming up the arm, if our arterial connection is going to be here, if we're going to take the vein, we're going to cut it here, sew it on end to side, and it's going to go that way. So blood flow is going to be going this direction, and then they'll access here and here with the needles. There are different types of configurations for the veins. The cephalic vein, which is in the forearm and then goes straight up the upper arm, that's the ideal conduit to use because it's superficial. It's pretty much a straight shot. And we always want to start our connection as far down in the hand or in the arm as possible. If we make a connection, say at the wrist, all the veins above that get flow and they mature and get bigger and better. If we make the connection here at the elbow, we have to cut the vein that is draining from the forearm, so we can never go backwards. It's kind of like Willy Wonka, always forwards, never backwards. If the cephalic vein isn't any good, there's another vein called the basilic vein, which is a superficial and kind of a deep vein. It can't easily be used for dialysis just in one procedure, so what we'll usually do is we'll make that connection, let the vein grow over the next month or so to a good size. Then we'll take somebody back to the operating room, make an incision up the arm, take down all the little branches from that vein and transpose it or bring it to the surface to make it easier to use. Because it's going to grow to meet that 6 millimeters in size, but it's going to be way too deep. It's not going to be 6 millimeters below the skin. So we're going to bring it up to the surface. If someone doesn't have a cephalic vein or a basilic vein, that's a good option, but they've got a good brachial or axillary vein, a deeper vein up in the upper arm, and they've got a good looking artery down below, that's someone that we can take and sew from the artery, connect it to a graft, usually it's made of Gore-Tex, tunnel it under the skin in a superficial course, and then connect it to the deep vein. So in summary, you have arteries, you have veins. We need to connect the veins to the arteries. If you've got a good cephalic or basilic vein, as found on ultrasound testing, we can create a fistula with that. Sometimes it's a single procedure to do that. Sometimes it's a two-part operation to create a fistula. If someone doesn't have a good vein for a fistula, that's okay. We can use an artificial vein to make that connection between the artery to a good deeper vein higher up in the arm. Once again, thank you very much for joining us for Whiteboard Wednesdays. I'm Dr. Jason Wagner. Thank you.